Hi, Akshay. I'm so glad we finally connected online. I'm like,
Yeah, I'm really happy to have this conversation. I'm excited. Thank you so much for reaching out.
yeah. And on that note, I know we have been in touch over the years, but I kind of let you hibernate, go and have your experience, struggle a bit, suffer a bit. But I'm going to kind of have you on a reflection. Could you tell us how your interest built up in public health and especially you focus a lot on youth psychosocial research, right? Can you walk us through a bit?
Yes, yeah, happy to. I think the most relevant part of my experience is the work that I did before my master's. I worked with just one nonprofit for 6 years, so a
Yeah.
fairly long time there. We're called Guardians of Dreams. We're a small nonprofit based in Bangalore, in India, and the work that we do is essentially support founders and caregivers of children in childcare institutions. India does not have a foster care system. We have shelter homes and children's homes,
Yeah.
what you would normally call orphanages.
Yeah.
And the work that I was doing was supporting founders and caregivers figure out how they can, integrate more evidence-based practices into how they're caring for children.
Yeah.
And I think this was my obvious interest into all issues development. I think the reason I chose public health, and this was honestly a difficult decision. I thought a lot about, should I be doing public health? Should I be doing public policy? Should I be doing public administration?
Yeah.
Because the programs all sound really similar. And even when you go through the coursework, there's so much of an overlap and it's hard to decide. I think the reason I eventually ended up choosing public health was a couple of reasons. One, my undergraduate degree was in biology, in biotechnology, chemistry, and zoology. And I thought the story was easy to build out to show my interest in the
Yeah.
biological
Yeah.
sciences and how it relates to health. I think, too, health is really broad. I think if
Okay.
you do any public
Yeah.
health program in the US, you basically study all determinants of health, and that includes your economic situation, it includes your housing, it includes caregiving. So I think the fact that health had such a broad development agenda meant that I could curate the program however I wanted to
Yeah.
do it,
Yeah.
but with the benefit of the fact that public health is one discipline. So, everyone who studies public health learns the same tools. You learn the tools of epidemiology, biostatistics, and you share a language. And I think, especially when you're applying for jobs that require you to have a public health background, it helps to know those tools.
Yep.
So I think that was the rationale for applying for a public health degree. And even within the public health program, my agenda is still fairly broad. I don't specifically look at health issues. I look at child protection. I look at youth development. I look at adolescent development. That's the broad area of focus. I think I'm not a researcher, but as a practitioner, the larger question I'm asking is what does it take for adolescents and young people to grow
Yeah.
into success for adults? There are certain experiences that we have that affect how we grow into adulthood, and there are certain experiences that we have that enable us to grow into productive, meaning-making adults. And as practitioners, as people in the nonprofit development world or in governments, just how do we create these safety nets so that young people can fully integrate into adulthood in the best way possible?
Yeah. It's very interesting, and also I know a lot of people are focusing on youth psychosocial research, especially with the online cyberbullying and all just ChatGPT and AI chat courses. It's so confusing all at once. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all. I think the best thing about doing this sort of, child protection, youth development work is it's truly multidisciplinary. You cannot have a
Yeah.
single approach. Like you
Yeah.
need to think about like health impact. You need to think about the law. You need to think about public policy. You need to think about like neuroscience. So it's a really multidisciplinary field. I think that makes it easier for you to figure out what like your functional role is.
Yeah.
Uh, the way I like thinking about like jobs, and this is feedback I got from a mentor from my previous organization, is that There's one part which is ideological, which is what is the larger vision of the world that you want to contribute towards. And then there is a second part, which is functional. What are you going to do? And,
yeah,
like if my larger ideological goal is to work to improve the lives of children, that's great. But functionally, what are you going to do? Are you going to be raising money? Are you going to be running programs? Are you going to be helping draft policy? Are you going to be doing research? There are
uh,
many things you can do
yeah.
functionally. And that I think that distinction is helpful.
Yeah, I think I really like this mentor more than that. This advice is like so on point. Like think about the contribution you can make and dream bigger. But I see you have been kind of going towards like startup space. I see a little chatter on your LinkedIn about that. Are you trying to build something as well?
I mean, I think there's always that impulse, especially when you're at Harvard. Everyone around you is building something, and I think
Yeah.
that's a good thing. But I think more specifically, what I really enjoyed in my last job was working with founders. Like I mentioned, a lot of my work was with founders in helping them problem solve. And I think what I've become very interested in is how do we build a supportive, enabling ecosystem for nonprofit founders?
Yeah.
Because this is super hard work to do. You're in a very under-resourced space. You don't often have all the technical expertise that you need, and you
Yeah.
don't have the money to like pay millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So how do we support like ambitious change makers? I think is the question
Yeah.
that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
And honestly, like if you start working with founders, the energy is just so infectious. Like there's a certain level of delusion that it takes to want to build something in this world, which I'm sure you're aware of, and you embody a lot. I think being around
Yeah.
that delusion is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you can't afford to sit back and let them take a big idea and run away with implementation because it's actually doable. And knowing that you have this impulse, which is like evidence based, you have worked here and now you are at Harvard. But if you can be frank a little bit and if you can tell a little bit about your application journey, how it was, did you enjoy it?
I think it was I think what I struggled with is the project management. So I ended up applying to 9 different programs. I don't know if
Um,
I would recommend
wow.
this for most people. I think my rationale was fairly simple, is that I would go to the place that gives me money. I'm keen on working in the development sector. I
Good.
continue to be keen on doing this. So at least in my head, when I was thinking, I was like, hey, I want to go to a fantastic school because I really like my job.
Yep.
And the only reason I would leave my job is if it's for a great opportunity. Otherwise, I don't want to.
Yeah.
Um, but I was also, I think, really aware of the fact that scholarships are not easy to come by. So I thought I
Yeah.
would increase my chances of getting scholarships by applying to more programs. I think I struggled with the project management because there were like 9 different applications. So, I ended up having to work with a couple of people to just get their help in project managing these applications. What I really liked was the story building. Like, I love writing. I've worked as a writing tutor and a writing coach before. So I think, and I'm super protective of my words. So I think that part of it I really enjoyed
Yeah.
because what you learn from the process is it is a very self-reflective process, right? You spend so much time thinking about your story and you
Yeah.
spend so much time thinking about what it is that you want to do. I think that just investing a lot of time into doing the application well is like a good place to start for when you come into grad school.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that part I really enjoyed. Um, the waiting part I did not. I hated waiting. I don't do well with like a lack of information.
Yeah.
I
Nobody
would
does.
scour Yeah, I would scour all these like Discord groups, Reddit forums to figure out when does like Columbia release its application,
Yeah.
to like release its admission, when does Harvard tell people. My one piece of advice is please don't do that. Like it gives you no value to know that Columbia is going to get back to you on this Wednesday because you're not going to be able to control any of it.
Yeah.
It'll just make you more anxious. Yeah, I kind of wish I hadn't
I
done that
understand,
part of
yeah.
the process.
Yeah, I think you can't help not feel enjoy while you're waiting, what do I do with my time? That is the advice people give. Hey, go back to your life. You have submitted, now go back to your life, right? Remember, you have a life.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that was I think having a full-time job that involved a lot of
Yeah,
field work was great because that way I could turn my brain off and be like, actually, I have important things to do, so I'm going to go back to doing that.
yeah,
But yeah, that was my application journey. Nine different programs across the US and the UK. I ended up wanting to just be in the US because at least at that time, UK, there were conversations about like job market's not being great. And the UK only had 1 year programs. And even in the US, between the programs that I got into, I ended up picking the program that was at least 1.5 years. I wanted 3 semesters. I knew that 2 semesters would be way too short for me. I think that
yeah,
actually ended up influencing my decision to come to Harvard a fair bit.
yeah. Uh, okay, I just go back to what you said because this is something that I do that a lot. I got my words because words have the power to influence your application decision. And if you enjoy writing, then you're like, hey, if I change this word, I want to make a bit more piercing, right? I want to make a bit more persuasive. I have a
Right.
vision, but I want to tell you with the development chapter we need this. So when you say that, can you elaborate a bit more? How did you enjoy the process of writing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way to look at it is that you're telling a story about your life, which is essentially these are the things that I've done in the past that I'm really proud of.
Yeah,
This is what I've learned from these experiences. And I think a lot of people miss the learning. I think that's probably the most common feedback that you give is what have you learned? It is not enough to detail out your
yeah,
CV because that's not the job of your essay. It's not to like write 4 lines about a 1 line experience.
yeah,
It is to instead say that, hey, I did all of this work, but more importantly, this is how it influenced how I think about the world. Or this is how it taught me that these are the skills that I have and these are the skills that I don't. And then once you look at the learning, you want to look at how is this learning influenced by larger thinking? And with this larger thinking, what is it that I want to do in
yeah,
the
yeah,
future?
exactly.
And now there's a past me that's learned these things. There's a future me that wants to do these things. And how will Harvard help bridge that gap?
Yeah,
That's the narrative that you're building. And I think to just treat it, I think the way that helps most people is just break it down into like 6 different
yeah,
questions. Like
yeah,
break down the essay into 6 questions and just answer each question honestly. What are the two biggest experiences you've had that you've learned a lot? What was it? What did you do? What did you contribute? And what did you learn from it? Now you've done all of this. What is your larger thesis about the space that you're working in? And where do you see yourself participating in
yeah,
that space?
yeah,
Let's say you are in child protection and you notice that there is a big mental health gap. What is your vision for the world? You want mental health services to be accessible to young people, irrespective of the backgrounds that they come from. That's
yeah,
great. How do you want to get there? Let's say you want to build your own startup. Let's say you want to support the government in running their programs better. And how will an MPH give you the skills and the competencies you need to do that work better?
yeah,
I think I love narrative nonfiction as a form of writing. So I think treating the personal essay like that was helpful. Of course, you don't need flair. I
yeah.
don't think that's necessary. You just need like simple sentences for the most part. You don't need to sound like a writer. You don't need big fancy words. You don't need like metaphors and analogies. You just need
I hate metaphor. I don't
you
understand
just need
metaphor. Right? Oh no.
yeah, you just need to state what you've done and what you want to do and
Yeah,
how the program is going to get you there. So I think yeah, I think it was lucky that I enjoyed writing. But even if you don't enjoy writing, to treat it as a story of your life. And honestly, something that I've told people that I think has helped them is just like sit with a friend and say it out loud. I think saying it out loud and your friend documenting it for you, saying, or like And your friend needs to probe you, saying, okay, you did this. Let's say you created a strategy for your company. Why was the strategy needed? What was the company struggling with?
yeah,
Hey, did the strategy work immediately, or did you have to do other things to make it work?
yeah,
I think having like someone who can probe you and like quickly write down the details as you speak
yeah,
will get you like a solid first draft. And
yeah.
then of course you can clean it up.
Yeah, I think it's like you either talk with a friend or you sit down with your child, have multiple versions of your child, and say, "Hey, Carla, what did you learn out of this? How did this experience shape
Exactly.
you positively or negatively?" I think it's very humbling to say, "I failed, right? I failed. I
Yeah.
couldn't make big out of it." It's okay to say, be vulnerable about it.
Correct, exactly. And to show what you've learned again from that experience. That's really the goal. Yeah, I think that's probably my advice. I think, honestly, at least in India, I don't think you're taught to write well in school. I don't think you're taught to write well in
Yeah,
college. Especially like mine being like a STEM program, writing is just not a foundational skill that you're taught. I
yeah,
think a lot of people are scared. Um, but just getting familiar with like a fundamental structure of this is how you write. This is how you have like a statement. This is how you explain your argument.
yeah,
And then this is how you write a conclusion or a summary or a recommendation at the end. Um, One, I think it helps you write like your college essays, but more importantly, I think it's a different way of just thinking. I would highly
yeah.
recommend just building that skill.
Yeah, thank you. That was so insightful because I know in data analysis they don't have the vocabulary. They can't think that way. Okay, oh, I
Yeah,
don't want to have a conversation with myself. I don't want to appear weak that way. But that's how the program. No, you are going to benefit from the program, and you are going to go far with this program. Hopefully one day. So just
correct.
having. Remember we were chatting earlier, and you mentioned that you were kind of getting funding work out for you because you were being, although you said you applied to 9 programs, I don't think it's a lot. It's very strategic here. 9 is a good number, but you knew that I need the funding. I need to make it work. Anything you would like
Yeah.
to add here?
Yeah, I think a few things. One, this is just my belief. I could be wrong about this, and you obviously have like way more experiences. I think when now I look at a profile and I look at a set of essays, I think I can make a reasonable guess as to what kind of universities will say yes to this profile. I cannot do that for scholarships. I think scholarships feel like a black box to me. I think because it depends on who's giving the money, what is the mandate behind the
Yeah,
funding, what is the representation in the cohort, many things that are fully invisible and that you don't have access to any information. So I think for people for whom scholarships are important, it becomes more of a numbers game. Like you have to apply to enough programs and enough programs that have a track record of having given funding in the past. I
yeah,
think that's incredibly important. And of course, don't miss out like there's a way to make a bunch of small scholarships work. So in India,
yeah,
you have the J N Tata Scholarship, you have the KC Mahindra Scholarship, you have Aga Khan Foundation Scholarship. You
yeah,
have a bunch of these smaller scholarships that are sometimes loan scholarships that also can make the larger financial picture better for you. The third thing that I want to say is, un- and this is something that you learn in a negotiations class at Harvard, I'm applying it retroactively, is that in a negotiation, a no is just the first offer.
yeah,
It's Yeah, and I think to keep that in mind. And I'm not saying hound the person. I'm not saying, like send angry emails, but you have to be persistent. I think just context there is when I first got into Harvard, I did not get funding. I was given zero funding, and obviously that made the decision much harder because it's a really high price that I end up having to pay. And I spoke to probably like 20, 30 people from Harvard around that time just to get a sense of what I can do. And a consistent piece of information I kept getting is, oh, Harvard does not negotiate. Harvard does not
yeah,
negotiate, don't bother. And it was this incredibly random. stranger who messaged me on Discord saying that, hey, you know what, you should do it anyway. And for some reason, I decided to listen to them. Because at the end of the day, I can only control the effort that I'm putting in.
yeah,
So um, between getting no funding to getting the funding that I received, there were basically, I think, 5 to 6 emails that all had no as a response from the financial aid office. And in each email, like we discussed before, I think what's important to show is one, of course, you want to establish need, and that, and you don't have to. There isn't like a need to do like like a poverty porn kind of situation. Like you don't have to say this is
oh
my
yeah,
family situation.
yeah,
Then it's many a times it's not professional to do that, and instead it's to say, hey, this is the background that I come from. I've worked only in the nonprofit space. Um, this was my annual income, and these are just facts. And and I want to go back into working in the development sector in these countries. So for
yeah,
me to be able to do that, I cannot afford to have like a massive loan, and that's establishing need. I think this people do. I think what people don't do enough of is to establish effort in
yeah,
exploring alternatives. And I think I did this with each email where I'd tell them that, hey, I'd give them updates. I'd say, oh, by the way, I've received offers from Hopkins, Oxford, etc., etc. But I'm still keen on Harvard. And I would also give them updates on effort that I'm putting in to secure funding from alternative sources. So I would tell them, oh, by the way, I've applied for the J N Tata Scholarship. I've applied for the KC Mahindra Scholarship. And in the next email, I'll be like, oh, I made it into the shortlist for the scholarship, just to let
yeah,
you know. And I think the way you want to frame the conversation is I've established need. Uh, I know Harvard is the right place for me. In fact, something that I spoke to professors. I spoke to, I think, probably 4 or 5 professors, including the head of student affairs. And I would reference those conversations in the email, being like, hey, I spoke to the head of this department. I spoke to the head of this department. And I feel even more affirmed in my decision that Harvard is the right place for me. And then three, hey, I'm putting in effort. You've told me to explore alternative funding sources. I am exploring them.
yeah,
And you tell them, I'm doing all of this. If there's anything you can do to help me out, if there's anything that you can do from your end, if you have any feedback on this scholarship essay that I'm submitting, I think it's to make it a partnership, and understand that it's not like they're hoarding money that they don't want to
yeah,
give, but there will always be someone more persistent and persuasive than you are, and you want to be that person.
yeah,
And I think one thing to keep in mind is that the timing really matters. At least in the US for MPH programs, I think there's a certain date after which schools are allowed to close the decision making. Basically, as a student, you need to say yes or no to the offers that you've received. And in the US, at least for MPH programs, it's all a single date.
yeah,
So, so you know that after that date, there'll be people saying no to the offers that they've got, and they'll include some scholarship applicants.
yeah,
What you want to do is make sure that you have a track record of at least like 3 to 4 weeks of writing to financial aid saying, if this money comes through, can you please think of me? Because I really need it. And I've really shown you that I'm keen on doing
yeah,
this.
yeah,
So I think the timing is important. I think the persistence is important. And I spoke to someone who told me, hey, even if they don't give you any money now, go when you reach school, set up a meeting with the financial aid office.
yeah,
Sit there and talk.
yeah,
I think it's just that willingness to look past whatever embarrassment that you feel to ask. And of course, to ask as politely as possible and to make sure that you're at no point in your tone do you sound entitled, but also understand that the financial aid office exists
yeah.
to make this work for you.
yeah. Can I just say thank you again, but let's not overplease you right now. But on that note, you said that earlier that most people don't really understand how scholarships work. It's not really expected on the website. It's like putting in the door or even understanding the mandate. But actually, let me just say to you, I'm so proud of your smart strategies and for just being persistent. Why? Because you understood the mandate of how funding can work. when it's not open knowledge, it often gets kept. We have been chatting about it, that there's a lot of gatekeeping when it comes to financial aid, who gets to be funded.
Yeah, it's super. I think having also talked to friends of mine who are now at Harvard,
Yeah,
I'm convinced that it's even more of a black box because I got fantastic funding from Hopkins, and I have a friend of mine who got like 75, 80% funding at Harvard, who got nothing from Hopkins. And then you're confused. You're like, I don't understand where this is coming
yeah,
from. I don't understand how these decisions are made, but it makes sense because a lot of named scholarships and a lot of merit scholarships are supported by families and supported by alumni, meant to be directed towards certain groups of people.
yeah,
And you don't have visibility to that. And
yeah,
there's nothing that you can control there, right? So I think the goal is to approach it as a numbers game. And I do want to say one thing that you, I think the most true thing is that your mileage may vary. Your financial situation, your family's financial situation is only something that you know. Because I spoke to so many people, and I
yeah,
have a Notion doc with all the conversations that I had, and I got consistently different advice. And that makes sense because I think people come from very different backgrounds and they have very different goals. So honestly, I was willing to come to Harvard even without a
yeah.
scholarship.
I
Of course,
remember.
now
Yeah,
that of course, honestly, now that I have it, I'm so grateful that I came with a scholarship because it allows me to be way more flexible in my job hunt. But I was willing to come without a scholarship, and that is because of just immense privilege. Both my parents are working, my sister is working. I don't have familiar responsibilities back home, and I was confident enough or mildly delusional enough to believe that the experience will be worth it for
yeah,
me and for my goals. I could not give the same advice to everyone. I can only tell people how I made the decision. My risk appetite was very different from other people's risk appetite. And I think just to be honest with yourself about how much risk you can afford to take, I have a really close friend who went to MIT with full funding, who was considering another program at Columbia. And we were having this conversation, and he told me that he was so glad that he went with the option that
yeah,
gave him full funding and a stipend. Of course, MIT is one of the best places in the world, so there was not probably like a big difference in the quality of programming, but
yeah,
the lack of anxiety in his life was huge for him, and that makes a lot of sense. So I think get all the inputs you can get from people, but at the end of the day, you have to be, I think, the judge of your own situation.
yeah. I really like how you use your word. It's so creative and it's also like so visual. Like the mileage can vary for different people. Just because you know someone who got the full funding, you look at them and say, "Hey, how did you do it? Let me try that." But you have to remember you are on your own path here. So when you're
Correct.
looking back at all these structures, what is like the one thing that you keep coming back to something apart from the academic and application.
Uh, I think I think Harvard has been just an incredible time. I want to encourage people who have like these big ambitions to, I think you should push for these dreams. I think the reason is what I've learned the most from Harvard. I think coursework is probably fantastic everywhere, right? Like,
Yeah,
I honestly, one of my hot takes is that some tenured faculty at Harvard should not be tenured, but that's not something I can control. I don't think it's the quality of instruction, although there are some incredible
yeah,
professors, and I work with many of them. I think the biggest difference has been the people. And what I've learned is probably what I will take away for the rest of my life is the audacity. I can't think of a better word. I think it's the audacity to just dream big.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
because you meet people who've done amazing things, and then you see them in class, you're sitting next to them. And then once in a while they'll ask a really dumb question, and then you're like, oh my God, they're like me.
yeah,
We're in the same class. We're having the same questions about the world. And of course, they're really hardworking and they're obviously super talented. But those dreams don't look that far away. anymore.
yeah,
And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway is also you don't need to go to Harvard to have this audacity. I know many people who've done it in very different paths. But for me, it was just like, wow, the
yeah,
world is much bigger right now. Um, and nothing feels that alien anymore. And I think that's probably the biggest
yeah,
takeaway. Oh, I will say one thing. So people, especially interested in the field that I'm interested in, like development or philanthropy, really start writing online if you can. I think building a public portfolio of your work is the most important thing you can do.
yeah,
I even people at Harvard don't do this enough, and that's something I'm trying to do more of myself. But I think having people access your work easily allows for opportunities to come to you.
yeah.
And I wish more people did that.
Yeah, I think if you write an online that actually caught my attention and encouraged me. I was hesitating a bit about inviting you, but I'm so glad I did. And I'm so glad we had this whole conversation. Thank you so much, Akshay, and I will be sure to keep following you on your Harvard journey.
Yes, and same for you, Carla. Best of luck. Thank you for putting out all the resources that you do. I know they're insanely valuable for students.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.